Hola, catch fighting connoisseurs. This is Kidney at BloodyElbow.com. Joined once again by Zane Simon of Bloody Elbow. UFC 194, 13 seconds, one punch. Conor McGregor, champion of the featherweight world.
I'm still reeling a little. Like I even said right before the fight, I was like, you know what? I'm ready. No matter what happens in this fight, I'm not going to be surprised. This isn't, anything can happen in here. This is not going to be a shocker to me, and I'm still kind of surprised. Like that was of all the things I could have expected, that was not one of them.
Yeah, a one-punch knockout always takes a little while to sink in. And, of course, a lot of people thought Jose Aldo was going to win. The odds have swung back and forth with the odds makers in the build-up to this fight. And Aldo looked flat coming in. I mean, he was keeping his head bowed. He wouldn't look at Conor. And so, I watched the fight with a couple of Aldo fans, and the disbelief and excuses were pouring out of them.
See, I picked Aldo to win, but I got no excuses. Like, I mean, you had to know going into this fight, if you'd done any, if you'd watched Conor McGregor fight at all, you had to know that the chances of him just absolutely getting a stunning knockout were incredibly high.
Yeah, there's always a good chance. The guy has incredible power and just caught Aldo coming in for a big punch, but it landed after McGregor's, and Aldo was already unconscious by the time it hit McGregor's jaw. So, and the camera angle they were showing live, it was very hard to see Conor's punch. You saw Aldo come in, land a punch, and fall over, basically.
Yeah.
And so
it was super weird. I mean, it was just kind of like, I was watching, and then I'm like writing a tweet, and I look up, and suddenly Conor's on the cage, and I'm just like, wait, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, I'm gonna date myself, but I looked down at the computer blogging when Randy Couture knocked Tim Sylvia down with the first punch at UFC 74 or whatever that was. But yeah, Conor McGregor's night. He is the champion. Sad end to Jose Aldo's incredible run as the only featherweight champ in UFC history, and Conor McGregor proved it tonight. There were questions after the Mendes fight. There are no questions tonight. He absolutely demolished the champion. You can't. I mean, ironically, the one-punch knockout is one of the more arguable sort of wins. It's got a very low likelihood of being repeated, actually, but it does often indicate, a superiority. You think of Junior Dos Santos knocking out Cain Velasquez in 64 seconds, and then only for Velasquez to utterly dominate their two subsequent rematches. So I don't know that happens. I don't know if Aldo gets a rematch after the fight Frankie Edgar put on against Chad Mendes last night. And the way McGregor beat Aldo, I don't think McGregor's going to be afraid of anybody. He's just line him up, I'll knock him out. And so very exciting development for the sport. Bummer for Jose Aldo. But Luke Rockhold dethrones Chris Weidman in an epic middleweight bout.
Yeah, no, that was great. I mean, it's a funny thing because, I don't feel bad for Chris Weidman. I feel bad for Jose Aldo. And
Weidman made a mistake that cost him the fight, in a fight he was probably going to lose, or a good chance he was going to lose anyway.
Well, I mean, there's some of that, but it's also that, Jose Aldo went out being hated. And that just sucks, He didn't do anything to be hated. He just became hated.
Well, McGregor riled a bunch of people up, but I don't think people really hate him that much.
I mean, he got booed all the way through the last year of his career, basically, of his title reign.
It's true. The boisterous Irish fans. You don't have to love them, by the way.
No.
People will tell you that, but you don't. So anyway, but congratulations. It's the Irish fans' night tonight. So shout out to all our Irish friends. But Luke Rockhold.
Yeah.
Chris Weidman came out early with a clever approach, took Rockhold's back, was looking really good until he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he won round 1. He lost round 2, but Rockhold looked like he was slowing down.
Weidman looked like he was coming on. He was winning round 3 when he tried a spinning back kick for no apparent reason.
No, yeah.
Pulled the trigger on it amazingly slow. Threw it out there like a lazy jab, except it was a fucking spinning back kick. Terrible idea. And Rockhold seized the momentum and just beat the piss out of Weidman on the ground. Should have been stopped, although Weidman was coming back afterwards a little tiny bit, just a flash of presence in the fourth round before he was once again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so amazing night from Luke Rockhold.
Yep.
A game performance, big mistake from Chris Weidman, who now, unfortunately, unless he puts together a second title run, is now going to be remembered as the guy who beat Anderson Silva, and that's it.
Yeah, well, he beat Vitor Belfort too, but yeah.
And Machida, but now in context, given Rockhold's trash talk, it looks like he beat a bunch of aging Brazilian guys more so than than he beat Rockhold. And
I do wonder if this is going to be the start of the middleweight round robin, though.
It could quite easily be, because we just saw Yoel Romero beat Jacare Souza in a very close fight. Romero got a 10-8 decision or 10-8 score on some cards in the first round. I thought he earned a 10-8. Got it on one judge's scorecard. But then Souza had a chance to get the finish in the third round and decided to go for a takedown and then not to go for a submission. Really kind of baffling decision making there, but incredible performance to come back from the pasting he took at Romero's hands. So the spinning back fist that came out of nowhere, was not telegraphed in any way, shape, or form, caught Jacare coming in hard perfectly, and then on the ground, Romero laid a beating on Jacare for the rest of the round. He was staggered coming out of that round, and for him to come back, second round was completely uneventful. Third round was all Jacare, and so a split decision, but Romero, it's hard to argue with Romero, and it really sets up a fun title fight for Romero and Rockhold.
Yeah, I mean, I will watch the shit out of Romero versus Rockhold. That's an awesome fight. And then I would, if Jacare gets a win in his next bout, then I'd watch Rockhold versus Jacare too, or Romero versus Jacare too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And if in the meantime Weidman fights from Jacare,
Weidman versus Jacare would be an enormously high stakes fight. Two guys with their backs absolutely against the wall, and would be a great fight. So the UFC is the big winner tonight. I mean, their boy Conor McGregor is thoroughly validated as not just a star, but as a legit, amazing fighter. I mean,
I will say that I think it was our former writer Pat Wyman, who's now over Bleacher Report, who tweeted out right after the fight that now the real fight begins, and it's the UFC versus McGregor over pay-per-view rights. And I do wonder if this is actually like the outcome that the UFC really wants.
Yeah,
it's McGregor with full control of the ship is a good thing for them.
Yeah, it's. I think he's got a ways to go to get full control of this ship, though. But it does give a lot of power to somebody who's definitely shown signs of being his own man in a way that other athletes haven't. So, yeah.
I mean, any contract he signs, I got to think, is only valid as long as he wants it to be. If he says, you know what, I'm not going to fight right now. If you guys want to headline an event with me, you got to pay me more than that. What are they going to do? Are they really just going to sit him and say, no, we can afford to not have $1 million by pay-per-view?
I would not put it past them. I would not.
I wouldn't put it past them to try it, but
don't push Lorenzo Fertitta, my Irish friend. That's my advice to Conor McGregor. Is Lorenzo has
my advice to him is to push them every second of
every day.
Absolutely lean on them all the time.
He's got the leverage, especially with Ronda losing, John Jones coming back, but took a serious ding with his year-long suspension for a DWI or a hit and run driving conviction. But still, I mean, it sets up a great fight. Conor McGregor's validated. It sets up McGregor versus Frankie Edgar in another fight that will be enormous pay-per-view business. Whatever negotiating headaches they have to go through, that's just part of the job for those guys. Yep. Like, I mean, like dealing with a trouble, and we don't even know that McGregor's going to be troublesome. We're assuming he's going to be a handful. But there's been so many changes with the fighters' lawsuit against the UFC, with Mayweather and different people floating around there, talking to fighters, and Bellator and Viacom out there. So could be interesting. But the fights tonight were awesome and set up more great fights. I mean, the possibility of Rockhold Romero and Weidman Jacare coming out of this, all great stuff out of the top 3 fights. And then you had welterweight Demian Maia just outclassed Gunnar Nelson completely. One of the most one-sided scorecards you're ever going to see in MMA. 2 30-25 scores and 1 30-26 score. Just like for Nelson, a guy who's a not great striker, not great wrestler, really good grappler, to call out Demian Maia, who's an incredibly great grappler, was just foolishness.
Yeah, and I mean, Nelson's not even not a great wrestler. He's a good wrestler, and he's not a great striker, but he's a good wrestler and a very good grappler. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy I called the shot on this one, saying that Maia was just gonna absolutely outwork him because.
Yep.
I mean, Maia, the thing is that it's not even just the grappling, which obviously Maia is great at, but his wrestling is
exceptionally good.
so insane. Like there was a point where Nelson was in Maia's guard. Maia rolled forward, grabbed one of Nelson's legs, and hit a single leg takedown with Nelson in his guard, and like ended up on top. And it's just like, who do you see ever doing that in MMA? Nobody does shit like that on the mat, and it's so like his wrestling game is so unbelievable. And Nelson, yeah, he had he was right there with him early on, but
he had a couple of flashes later on. He had some great escapes throughout the fight.
Yeah,
and it shows an enormous amount of heart and savvy to stay in there for 3 rounds, just getting plastered by Demian Maia in those positions, very deadly positions, especially. And if you were to break mentally and give up, Maia would sense that and submit you in seconds. I mean, so a gritty performance from Nelson, but boy, he got outclassed tonight. And then the only dud on the card was the opener, Max Holloway and Jeremy Stephens, former training partners, only really began to open up late in the 3rd round.
Yeah, that was just an unfortunate fight. I don't know. Holloway, it's one of the things I get that Jeremy Stephens is a dangerous power puncher. He is, but Holloway had openings in that fight that it felt like he didn't take advantage of. It felt, every time Stephens threw and missed on a counter, it's like, well, that's your opening to come back in and hit him. We've seen Holloway put on great striking performances, and this just felt like he just did enough to win all the way through.
Yeah, and it is what it is. A disappointing fight. Knowing they've trained together makes it harder to expect amazing fireworks. But there was potential for a real Donnybrook there, and we didn't get it. But then on the preliminary card, veteran, former WEC champ Uriah, California kid Faber, edged out Frankie Saenz, took the unanimous decision. 2 judges gave Saenz a round. But that was a tougher fight for Uriah Faber than it looks on paper there. I mean, Saenz was always a tough challenger for Faber, and I guess that's what Faber wants, is to stay sharp and fight tough guys and show he's still up there, because he's immediately afterward talking about a title shot, Dominic Cruz or TJ Dillashaw. He wants him, and honestly, those fights make sense.
Yeah, they make sense. Like from a website perspective, from a guy who's going to write articles about it, yeah, they make sense. I get that.
From a business perspective, you're going to sell pay-per-views and tickets too. I mean,
yeah, and no, I'm not saying they don't make sense from a promotional perspective, from a website perspective, from a promotional perspective, from the perspective of actually putting a competitive fight on in the cage.
Well, we don't know where Cruz is going to be. I mean, I would think that Cruz and Faber is always going to be competitive.
If Cruz looks shot, then it makes sense. Yeah, then Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber. But, I mean, I picked Saenz going into this mostly because I did not trust Faber to still look like Faber. And, frankly, he didn't. He won. He did just enough to win.
He had Faber moments throughout the fight. I mean,
he had moments, but he looked a major step slower and sloppier than he has at any point in his career.
Yeah, he's definitely losing steps, and that's why they need to. I think the TJ Dillashaw Faber fight has some juice to it, and it's one they could make.
It would be fun, and it would be fun to build up, and then if it would also provide some really fun commentary and fallout if Faber got absolutely hosed. That would make the whole like Ludwig versus Faber thing just that much juicier.
Yep. Yep, and I think there's an excellent chance of that happening. So, but it was a good fight, gritty performance from
Yeah.
Faber, impressive performance from Frankie Saenz. It's one of those things like when they booked it, I'm like, man, Saenz has a real chance to beat Faber, and then what do you have? Because you're not ever going to make a star out of Frankie Saenz,
No.
but Faber came through, and now you've got a potential title shot there in the bantamweight division. So, or potential title fight that makes money sense, and it could be two in a row because I think TJ Dillashaw versus Dominic Cruz should have some juice compared to some of the matchups in that division. Then you had women's strawweight Tisha Torres decision, Jocelyn Jones-Linebarger, dominant 3-round performance. The only time the beating on the feet slowed down was when Torres decided to go into the clinch up against the cage.
Yep. Yeah,
And
I mean, Linebarger
she
finally
landed a
landed a
hard
big.
punch at the end.
Yeah, she landed a hard punch at the end, but it wasn't enough to change the whole fight. Torres just outclassed her technically everywhere. Better striker, better wrestler, better clinch fighter, better in all parts. The only real thing is that Torres doesn't really sit down on her punches because she's always moving so much, and Linebarger really does and is a pretty big strawweight. So at the end, when they actually just got into a firefight, Linebarger was landing the harder shots,
Yeah.
Jones Linebarger. But yeah, I mean, Torres won like she should against a short notice replacement.
Yep. So then you had welterweight Warley Alves submit Colby Covington in a minute 26. Impressive performance from Alves, disappointing from Covington.
Yeah, I kind of hope to see Covington make that a closer fight than it was. I still think I have a lot of hope for him. I know
Oh
some
yeah,
people.
this should be a very educational fight for him. I don't think
Yeah,
it's definitely not. He didn't take any real damage. He just got caught in a
no.
submission, and so I think it's the fight he could come out a much stronger fighter for.
It's one of the things you see a lot from young fighters early in their careers is that they'll go for the same things over and over without realizing how much danger they're in,
Yeah,
and they get subbed because of it. You see a ton of young, great fighters get subbed that way. I mean, even Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo, guys like that have submission losses early in their careers from when they were just putting themselves in stupid spots.
yep,
And
and that's what happened to
yeah,
Covington. And Alves, a very promising kid, so we'll see. And
yeah,
then we had the opposite scenario when the heavily favored Kevin Lee got knocked out by
yeah,
Leonardo Santos. A fight, Santos has exceeded expectations his entire UFC run, winning the Ultimate Fighter in Brazil, late 30s, and he's knocking out a guy in Kevin Lee who was expected to be the young show pony.
yeah. That's a bad setback for Lee. I mean, that's a lot worse than Covington getting subbed out because that's at least
That's
Covington
head trauma.
losing something that is not quite his specialty. He's not a great grappler; he's a great wrestler, and wrestlers often get submitted. But Lee has really cut his teeth as a wrestle boxer who's a decent striker and a decent wrestler. Again, going against a BJJ guy who's kind of an okay Muay Thai striker and getting absolutely knocked out in the first round is just that's not
Yeah.
good.
No, and the head traumas are going to be real. And speaking of head trauma, in the Fight Pass closer, Magomed Mustafayev demolished Joe Proctor in a minute 54 with knees
Yes.
and punches. Just an incredibly scary dude. Another nice
Mustafayev
signing.
making up for a Rockin for me.
Yep.
Mustafayev is somebody that we had pegged as I think the number 2 welterweight prospect in the world in our most recent scouting report, and that now that he's at lightweight, he looks like a top elite level fighter.
Yeah. So exciting to see that. And then you had Yancy Medeiros get a surprise split decision over John McDessie. Landed a big punch late in the third round, but I had it 2-1 for McDessie, and he had been winning the third round up to the point of that punch. So
Yeah, I had it 2-1 for McDessie too. I will say I'm not like
no, McDessie didn't
bored
ever
by it.
pour it on. I mean,
No.
So and then you had Ultimate Fighter veteran winner Court McGee demolish Marcio Alexandre Jr. Dude's third straight loss in the UFC. I think he's done. He looked very sad
Yep.
after the fight. Good to see Court McGee get a win after a long layoff. But let's talk about Conor McGregor some more. We've got easily the most popular featherweight champion in UFC history, easily the most popular European champion or fighter, period, in MMA history at this point. He just passed up Crow Cop. As you know, Crow Cop never won a title, had a great run
Yep.
in Pride, but had a storied but mixed career in the UFC. But McGregor at this point now has unified the belt, demolished the only champion in featherweight division history in the UFC, and just, I mean, there was no question Jose Aldo has been the man at featherweight for the whole of this decade, basically, and now McGregor is.
Yeah, I mean McGregor, it's kind of amazing because you know the other two top major performers in UFC history have been Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey. In their career, those are the other two like really shining stars on the
Breakout
and
stars. I mean, you had Chuck Liddell and
GSP and Silva.
yeah, and GSP and Silva had their moments. But yeah, this
Those are
McGregor.
the breakout stars. And the thing with GSP and Silva did it over long periods of time. Really, like
Yeah.
this ride to glory that took a while. But the thing with McGregor is that's so unbelievable is that featherweight is not heavyweight and it is not women's bantamweight. That is a division that is full of as many good fighters as the UFC has. Like that is a ridiculously tough division to just run house in, and it's absolutely unbelievable that McGregor has been able to do it.
Yep, and it's a testament to the power in his hands, and also I think some pretty ideal matchmaking for him. I mean, he's definitely one. At this point, you can't argue. He's knocked out Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes back to back. Frankie Edgar's still out there, but just because he could even lose to Frankie Edgar, and nobody's going to say he wasn't the best guy in the division. I mean, there was a point around the Dustin Poirier Dana Silver fights where people had a case. Oh, this guy's getting rushed. He's not getting rushed anymore. He is fully baked. He is a made man, a legit champion, a legit superstar, and in a division that historically has not been a big draw for the UFC, and like you say, is incredibly tough. So yeah, this is. Do I jinx it? Is it the Conor McGregor era?
No, that could jinx it. It looks. I don't see anybody on the immediate horizon that I think beats him. I don't think Frankie Edgar does as good as Frankie Edgar looked against Chad Mendes. Even with this fight with Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor, those kind of flash first round KOs, like you can't judge a matchup on those first round KOs. And looking over their actual whole careers, I don't see Frankie Edgar as the answer to Jose Aldo or to Conor McGregor.
McGregor. No, I mean McGregor's so much bigger, he's faster, and he hits so much harder. I think Edgar would have to get him down early and keep him down and beat him up on the ground. But incredible performance from Conor McGregor, and definitely going to be an interesting era in UFC history as Conor McGregor emerges as currently you'd have to say the promotion's biggest star, with Rousey having lost.
Yeah.
John Jones not a champion. A GSP long gone, maybe going to come back. Anderson Silva done. So
Rousey probably has if Rousey, until her next fight, Rousey is probably still the bigger overall seller for them.
Yeah, the next fight's going to be bigger than McGregor's next fight, but if she loses that one, and there's to me a high likelihood that she does, based on the way she lost to Holly Holm,
then she's gone.
Yeah, she's not even saying I want to stick around. I mean, she was bigger than the sport, and so when you're bigger than the sport, you really can't play the Uriah Faber role of, hey, yeah, I'll show. Oh, you've got a Fox Sports 1 card. Do you need me a headline, or like, where do you need me, boss? Ronda Rousey's not going to do that, and that leaves a lane wide open for Conor McGregor. At middleweight, it's hard to see Luke Rockhold as a superstar, but for the promotion, they're fine with this keeping moving. Weidman wasn't a big draw at middleweight champ, so Rockhold is just as good as Weidman in any possible way. I mean, pretty. You swapped one All-American white guy for another All-American white guy. The only difference is what coast they're on. It's not like you're hitting any exciting new demos, but with Yoel Romero out there, Jacare Souza still out there. This title could be Tim Kennedy out there. I mean, this title could be flipping around for a while. So very fun night. big night, and we'll be back next week with the UFC on Fox. We got lightweight title Rafael dos Anjos versus Donald Cerrone. That ought to be a fun fight. So, stick with us. We'll have all the Fixins MMA vivisections, care, don't care preview. If I did it, the whole kit and caboodle. So subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube. Subscribe to MMA Nation on iTunes if you want to just hear this or download it on your phone or whatever and listen to it at your leisure. Give us a follow on Twitter at TheZaneSimon, at KidNate. Read us at BloodyElbow.com. And adios, Zane. Adios, MMA aficionados. Good night.